With the help of Hashem, we are learning the new Masechtas Rosh Hashana. As Hasidus explains that the concept of Rosh Hashana is, in as much as there is Hashgacha Pratis and Hashem's involvement in the world in a specified way every moment, but there is certain moments in the year where there is like a new Hamshacha of what the Alter Rebbe calls a new light, that from it the entire year is going to be influenced. And even though that normally when a Jew speaks about Rosh Hashana, what comes to mind is Echad B'Tishrei, and if that would be the case, then everyone asks the question, why are we starting Masechtas Rosh Hashana after Beitzah? We should have learned Masechtas Rosh Hashana before Yuma. So Rosh Hashana, Yuma, and Sukkah. But really, as we will learn in our Mishnah, that there are 4 Rosh Hashanas. We will actually have a remez in the Mishnah that according to the Rashbi, there's also Yutas Kislev as Rosh Hashanah, as I'll explain. No, it's Rosh Hashanah, and the first Rosh Hashanah mentioned in the Mishnah is not Echad B'Tishrei, but it's Echad B'Nisan. The concept of Rosh Hashanah is that even halachically, it's important to distinguish between one year and the other. And as we mentioned, once a year for certain things, there is like a Oir Chodesh that comes into the world that will affect, and it will be like the head for the entire year. And we will see that there are various dates that are considered Rosh Hashanah for various halachas. And just as one example, which is less known, it says in the parsha of Aser Ta'aser that we read on Yom Tov, right? We just read it on Shmini Atzeres, Eis Kol Tfu Azarecha, Ahayoytze, that comes out of the land, Shana B'Shana. When we give Trumas U'Maisres, it's important that we don't give Trumas U'Maisres from produce that grew on one year for produce that grew on another year. How do you determine Shana? What determines the year? Happens to be that when it comes to Trumas U'Maisres, there are really 2 discussions. This is important to speak about on the introduction. There is what is considered the beginning of the year, and then there is another discussion how much of that product needed to be finished, matured, for it to be considered ready. And now you have to question what year was it ready in. And as we will see, that when it comes to vegetables, what counts is when was it picked. The picking of the vegetable is what, now the vegetable is picked, now therefore it's ready, and now we have to determine what year was it picked in. And indeed, we will see that when it comes to vegetables, Echad B'Tishrei will be the Rosh Hashanah. When it comes to grains, the question is not when the grains were harvested. By grains, when was the grain matured a third or more? That is when it's considered a finished product. And by grains, we also have the Rosh Hashanah of Echad B'Tishrei. When it comes to fruits, it's not about when it was picked. It's not about when it was a third ready. When it comes to fruits, the question is when did it emerge on the tree? That's called Chanata. When did it bud, or when did the flower of the budding fall off, so a little bit of the fruit is already discernible? And by fruits, as we know, the Rosh Hashanah is either Echad B'Shvat or Tu B'Shvat. Just giving an example that according to, when we speak about fruits, Rosh Hashanah is Tu B'Shvat. We're going to be learning about predated documents versus post-dated documents. How one of them invalidates the document to a certain degree, and one does not. We're going to learn about the concept that Yoim Echad B'Shana Chashav Shana. That sometimes one moment, one day, and really it's only part of the day, is tantamount to an entire year. When it comes to us documenting certain historical events, in many cases, we don't say that the first anniversary was on the day that that event happened the next year. There are certain cutoff dates, Rosh Hashanahs, that whenever that date passes, we entered the second year since that event. And the Gemara is going to have a phenomenal discussion when it comes to Yetzias Mitzrayim. Now we know Yetzias Mitzrayim happened Tezvav Nisan. We make the Yom Tov of Pesach commemorates Yetzias Mitzrayim. However, whatever happened after Yetzias Mitzrayim in the beginning was in the first year since Yetzias Mitzrayim. When do we change the year? Now we change the year of Yetzias Mitzrayim by Nisan. And by the way, not in middle of Nisan, but in the beginning of Nisan. However, the Gemara wants to know why don't we, and how do we know that we don't count the Exodus from Tishrei, and there is such a Gavaldik Havamina, and we're going to at least begin today learning one approach. We're going to have, God willing, on that Gimel another approach, but this question of whether we should mark the next year since the Exodus, either from Tishrei or from Nisan, is a very significant approach, as we will explain Al Pi Chasidus at the end of the class. But Chavre, let's begin with tremendous joy, right? Daf Beis Amud Aleph, all the way in the top, says the Mishnah that Arba'a Rosh Hashana, the concept of a Rosh Hashana, like we mentioned, that since halachically we have to distinguish between one year and the other, and there are many times that you have one date set by Hashem, and when that date passes, you entered now the second year, a new year. And deeper, during that Rosh Hashana, that is not only the beginning of the year, but that is the head of the year. Just like the head controls the entire body, there are certain moments in the calendar that Hashem infuses in that moment of time a new koyach for the next entire year. There are 4 such dates. And the first that the Mishnah will mention, interestingly, is not Echad B'Tishrei. And therefore, again, that takes away the whole kasha. Why isn't Masechtas Rosh Hashana before Yuma? Because the first one is Be'echad B'Nisan. Now, it happens to be that in this Masechta, we'll aside of discussing how to establish a calendar, it's more about the calendar, about the markings of time. But yet, truth be told, that there are 4 chapters, and in the latter 2 we will speak about what we call Rosh Hashana, but that's not the beginning of the Masechta. Now, for what is Echad Ben Nisan considered Rosh Hashana, says the Mishnah, for 2 dinim. Din number 1, Limelachim, for kings. And as the Gemara will clarify, and we'll see later also that we might be speaking, according to Rab Chizda, dafka about Jewish kings. But when a king ascends his throne, we don't say that if you write a document, and the minhag was that when we wrote documents, we would write to the year of so-and-so's reign. Well, is it in the first year of his reign? Is it in the second year of his reign? We don't say, well, if this king became a melech, I don't know, on Yud Shvat, so then every year, the next Yud Shvat is his second year. When you write legal documents, it doesn't work that way. There is a certain unified date, and the Mishnah is saying it's Echad Ben Nisan, and the Gemara is going to specify, that means if a king ascended his throne, Chav Tes Adar. If you write a document on Chav Tes Adar, you would write that we are in the first year of so-and-so's reign. Echad Ben Nisan, we would write, we are now in the second year of so-and-so's reign. Because Echad Ben Nisan marks the entry of the new year for the king. And the Gemara will explain, it wasn't only that people customarily would write the year based on the reign of the king, but this actually will have a tremendous effect on the legality of the document, as we will be speaking about pre-dated document versus post-dated documents. And number 2, second line in the Mishnah, third line in the Mishnah, the second rule for which Echad Ben Nisan is Rosh Hashana is Ve'lo Regalim, to mark the Seder of our Yomim Tovim, specifically Pesach, Shavuos, and Sukkos. And as we will learn a little bit later, that if a person makes a vow to bring a carbon, even though ideally they should bring it ASAP, but there is a negative violation that one will, God forbid, violate if you linger not bringing it, Bal Ta'achar. When do you violate Bal Ta'achar? It's connected to the passage of the 3 Regalim, and the first one of the 3 is going to be the one that is in the month of Nisan. Interestingly, we don't say Tezvav, but we say Be'echad Ben Nisan. That is when the year begins. And now, as we will learn, I think there are 5 opinions amongst the Tanoim when we are going to count how many Yomim Tovim went by and you still didn't bring it. Now you're violating Bal Ta'achar. Echad Ben Nisan will be the beginning of the count. And a lot more about Bal Ta'achar when we learn about it soon in the Gemara. Rosh Hashana number 2. Be'echad be'elul, Rosh Hashana l'maiser behema. And as we quoted in the words of the introduction, that just like we find the pasuk, Aser ta'aser eis kol tfu azarecha hayoytzi hasode shana shana, that you cannot be ma'aser from one year for something that came into the world in a different year. Every year has to be joined together, and you give off from that year's produce Trumas U'Maisris. That's not only true regarding that which grows from the ground, but it's also true regarding animals. And as we know explicitly from the Torah, that if you own domesticated animals, that's cattle, goats, right, and sheep, all that which was born into your herds this year has to be tithed by you putting them into a pen, you making them exit the pen through a narrow passageway, and you're going to count the animals leaving that corral, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and v'ho'asiri yia kodesh. And now you're going to go ahead and you're going to smear with red paint on the back of the animal to know that this animal is Meiser Behema. You don't gather animals that were born this year with animals that were born another year. Again, I know what born, I know what it means. But when does this year, what's this year? It's Echad Be'elul. Animals that were born from last year, Echad Be'elul, until this year, let's say Chavtes, Menachem Av, they are animals of that year. However, on this second Rosh Hashana, Rabbi Elazar and Rab Shimon both hold that for Meiser Behema, Be'echad B'Tishrei is going to be their year, their Rosh Hashana. Now, when people learn the Mishnah, they erroneously will think, according to Rab Elazar and Rab Shimon, there are only 3 Rosh Hashanas, because the Mishnah is going to mention in the next line, the third Rosh Hashanah, Be'echad B'Tishrei. At least here there's an emes, that we know that Yutas Kislev is Rosh Hashanah LaChasidis. So here you go, and then the Rashbi, Al Pi Pnini Yisro Inyanim, he's not losing his 4 Rosh Hashanahs. All he's saying is that the Echad Be'elul, he disagrees, it's not from Ma'aseh Behema, but there is another Rosh Hashanah. And later it was Nizgala that for Hasidus, the same Nakuda, that on Yutas Kislev there's a Sa'or Chodesh that comes into the world that affects the whole year. Okay, and next, the third in the Mishnah is Be'echad B'Tishrei. Now, Be'echad B'Tishrei is Rosh Hashana L'Shanim. It's Rosh Hashana for years. This is something that we are the most familiar with, perhaps, and we'll leave this for the Gemara to explain better. What does it mean it's Rosh Hashana for years? And that's the whole sugya that we're going to have soon. The machlekes between Rabbi Eliezer and Rabbi Yeshua. When was the world created? When was Adam created? V'chulei. We'll leave that for later. Number 2, Ula Shmitin, Ula Yoivlis. That when we count, right, the cycle of years, like now Tavshin Pei Beis is a Shemitah year. When does the Shemitah year begin? Be'echad B'Tishrei. And when we merit to count the Yovel, when does Yovel begin? Be'echad B'Tishrei. And again, a lot more details we'll learn in the Gemara. Another din, says the Mishnah, Netia for saplings. This is very important. Says Rashi, what are saplings? Rashi's 18 lines from the top of the Amid. That the Torah says that when you plant trees, the first 3 years, even if the tree will produce fruit, those fruits are called arla. Not only may you not eat it, you may not even derive benefit from it. So again, don't count the 3 years by saying, I planted it today. Okay, so when does the year become 1 year old? When 1 year completes. Doesn't work that way. There is a date in the calendar, and Rashi says that even if you planted the tree in Av, and there's a reason why he says that, and we'll learn more details about in the Gemara. So then, once you come to Echad B'Tishrei, this tree is in its 2nd year for the count of Arla. Once,
Rabbi, would it be expected to be on
so that will make life way too easy. Oh, the Arla is so complicated, Yakir. So 1 second. So the example that we just repeated from Rashi is how you begin counting the 3 years. Now, Rashi doesn't say that if you planted the tree Erev Rosh Hashana, Chavtes Elul, then Echad B'Tishrei, the tree entered the 2nd year. The tree has to be planted. We'll learn more details. And it has to take root, and it has to be there for a certain amount of time. Let's just stick to Rashi's vague words. If you planted it in the month of Av, he doesn't even say what date in Av, but that's a very short amount of time. Then Echad B'Tishrei, the tree is in the 2nd year. Next year, Echad B'Tishrei, the year is in the 3rd year. Now, when do we exit the Arla years? Whether it is in Eretz Yisrael going into Neter Revoi, we'll speak about this later. Whether it is Chutz La'aretz going into the way we can just eat the fruit, it doesn't leave Arla be'echad b'tishrei. It leaves either echad b'shvat or tu b'shvat. So hold on, Yakir. So you're right. You mentioned the date, but that's about when you leave the Arla. But when you begin counting the years from planting, it's not from the date that you decided to plant the tree. But like we mentioned, as long as it was planted a certain minimum amount of time before Echad B'Tishrei is entering year number 2. Uli Yerakos. This is so important.
So it would only be Arla for 5 months, from Tishrei till Tu Shvat.
No. It would be Arla for 3 years, and the 3 years wouldn't end. It's possible that you will diminish the beginning of the 3 years. But you have to go through 3 years, and then you only exit the 3 years, Echad B'Shvat or Tu B'Shvat V'Paskin, like Beis Hillel Tu B'Shvat. It won't be 3 years what people think 3 years.
So technically it can start in the end of 1 year starts Tishrei, 1 full year, and then it ends Shvat that year.
On the fourth year.
So it'll be 2.5 years.
Otazoi. That's the minimum. Very good, Rabbi Chaim. Now, Uli Yerakos is again like this. This is so important, these rules. Like to be quoted from Rashi, that when you tithe produce, you cannot tithe produce that grew or that was ready or that came into the world is the best world, from 1 year over the other year. So, now, remember another very important pre piece of information, that the yerek, a vegetable, is considered here when you picked it. That's called basar lekita. Grain is considered here when it's ready, a shlish. Fruits are considered ready when there is chanata, when it's budding, when it emerges on the tree. Remember that. That's one very important piece of information. But when is it, from when do you count the years? So by vegetables, Echad B'Tishrei is the Rosh Hashana. So by vegetables, it's about picking. All of the vegetables that were picked from this year Rosh Hashana to next year Rosh Hashana will be tithed together. Now tithing vegetables is only midrabanan. It doesn't matter, it's tithed together. If you have a vegetable that was picked Chaf Tes Elul, it's going to be part of last year's produce that has to be tied with that which grew last year. And by the way, by grain, even though the Mishnah doesn't mention it, grains, the Rosh Hashana to mark the years for grain is also Echad B'Tishrei, but by grain it's not about picking, and it's not about emerging, it's about Mishehevi Oy Shlish, when it's mature, a third. But this is in contrast to fruits, that when you want to know what years do you have to group fruits together to tithe them of that year, I know by fruits it's first about when did it emerge on the tree, but what is the year, what's the Rosh Hashana, that's the final machlokes. That's the fourth Rosh Hashana, whether it's Echad B'Shvat or whether it is Tu B'Shvat. Be'echad B'Shvat Rosh Hashana le'ilan, kedivrei Beis Shammai, Beis Hillel oimrim, b'chamisha asar boi. Okay. So very good. And Chamisha Asar Boy, we paskin like Beis Hillel, isn't only about tithing the fruits of the tree, but Yakir, it's also when do we end the Arla? When do we enter Neter Avoy? Not Echad B'Tishrei. It's amazing. The years begin by Echad B'Tishrei. It ends by Echad B'Shvat or by Tu B'Shvat. So these are the four Rosh Hashanas.
And why there is a chiluk between fruit and vegetables? Echad B'Tishrei, and the other one is the Echad B'Shvat.
And everything else, you know, Yakir. So let me say, let's say the Al Pi Chasidus is, let's go about that, is that there's a certain bracha that Hashem gives to the produce on these dates. Not for the produce that's here in the world now, for whatever is going to come for the next entire year. It's the Ruchni, the moment where there is a new Hamshacha of a Oir Chadash for that part of creation. And that's why it becomes the Rosh Hashana. Okay, says the Gemara. So first din in the Mishnah was that Echad ben Nisan is the Rosh Hashana for kings, like we explained, for kings, meaning that when people write documents, one of the ways they would mark time is that they would write, we are in year so-and-so from that king means from when that king became a monarch. And it doesn't go by each king will have their own personal anniversary. And then, like again, a king became a king on Yud Shvat. So then you'll say in the next year, Yud Shvat adds in the second reign of the king. When you write a document, it doesn't work that way. No matter what date the king de facto, the date in the calendar date, became a king, once you hit Echad ben Nisan, you say now this monarch entered the second year. Let's read it inside. L'malachim, the Gemara asks, L'may hilchasa, is there a halachic consequence by knowing that you changed the year in the documents, not by the anniversary of the king, but by Echad ben Nisan? Let's say you would not know that. Is there a consequence? And the Gemara says, huge. Amar Rab Chizda, yes. L'shtarais, meaning that when you write a document, let me just say it out by heart, any financial document, by default, whether the clause is written explicitly or not, places a lien. Let's speak about, just for example, if there's a borrower, if a lender borrows money, the lender automatically has a lien on all of the real estate of the borrower from when the document was written. That's very important. And that secures the loan. Even if you didn't write it in the document that the borrower is agreeing to have a lien applied, a documented loan places a lien on the properties of the borrower. Now, if the borrower were to go ahead, prior to due date, prior to paying back the loan, if he would go and sell his properties, the buyer, that's the due diligence that's incumbent upon anyone who buys property to find out whether the seller owes money. And once something is documented, it's easier for you to find out, and it's expected on you to find out. And if the borrower defaults, then the purchaser will lose the property. Now, it doesn't mean the borrower won't own the money to the purchaser. He will. But the lender has the first claim because there was already a lien. Now you can appreciate that if you have a predated document, it gives the lender a wrong lien. It's not fair for the purchaser. If the borrower borrowed money today, Rosh Chodesh Mar Cheshvan, but the document was written, I don't know, Chaf Hei Tishrei. Let's say between Chaf Hei Tishrei and Echad B'Mar Cheshvan, that borrower owned a piece of property and he sold it. He sold it before taking a new loan. The loan was never liened on that property. If the document is predated, the lender could erroneously collect from that property. And therefore Chazal made a takana that if you predate any loan document, not only can you not collect money from the date on the document, which we know is wrong, even if we discover when the loan really happened, Beis Din knows it for sure, that document can never be used to collect any real estate. According to Rashi, the loan is still there. The borrower owes the money, but it's like a milva al peh, it's like an undocumented loan, and where there is no lien on anything. You got that? Now, if you write a post-dated document, a post-dated document is to the betterment of the borrower. It only hurts the lender. A post-dated document means, even though theoretically, if the loan was made today, if someone lended me money today, $1 million, today, Echad B'Mar Cheshvan, Rosh Chodesh Mar Cheshvan, and I own a house today, really, the lender should have a lien on my house. If it was post-dated and I wrote it for 10 days from now and I sold my house in between, the lender loses out. But no michshel will happen. So a post-dated document, even though it's not emes, there's no gezerah prohibiting a post-dated document, and a post-dated document will not, so to say, become weakened. The lender can collect money from the date on the document. And now you understand why we have to know halachically how to write the year of the king. In other words, you have to know when you write the year, it was the monarch in the first year, was the monarch in the second year, to determine whether the document is predated or post-dated once we know it was not written on the correct date. Let's read inside the Gemara, and then we'll read a little bit of Rashi. Rashi gives a little bit of a complex, but a practical case. Ditnan. We learn in the Mishnah in Shvi'is that shtarei chayv or shitrei chayv, loan documents, if they are hamugdam, and if they were predated, then they're psulin. Psulin, according to Rashi, means not that the document itself is not valid. Many people do it by checks, by the way. That's called a shtar mugdam. But a shtar mugdam has a penalty on it, midrabanan, that it can never be used to collect any real estate. You cannot be goiva from mishubadim. However, if the document is a post-dated document, then they're still kosher. And therefore, we have to know when you wrote, if a person wrote the date, not on the Yiddish calendar date, but he wrote, I'm writing this document, the Echad B'Kislei, from so-and-so's reign. You have to understand how to count the years of the reign. Pashit. We're good? Let's read, we have time. Let's read inside the Rashi. Rashi is the second to last narrow line, and Rashi, he actually applies it in a little bit of a complex case. Ditran, and there's a reason for that. Ditran b'Masechta Shvi'is, that shtarei chayv hamugdamim psulim. Right, the first wide line in Rashi, right under the Gemara. Why is it psulim? Since the lender will want to collect, if he needs to, he'll want to collect lien property even if it was already sold by the borrower to a purchaser. And from when will the lender really have the right to collect such properties? Mizman shebeshtar. You look at the document. From when the document which records when the loan was given. And if it's going to be predated, then it's not going to be correct. Because if the sale happened before the loan, or the loan happened later, the document wrote it pre, then in the document it sounds like shahalva kadma. So since it's wrong on all of the purchasers who did the due diligence, when they bought the property, there was the borrower, the seller, was not yet a borrower. So it's wrong for them to lose the property. They're being wronged. And therefore, Konsu, the Chachamim made a takana, milik boizboy, that you can never use this document to collect, but what can you not collect? Not only can you not collect from the date of the document, if Beis Din finds out the real date of the loan, you can't even collect mishubadim, you cannot have a lien even from the date and further. Right, that's very important. And it becomes like a milva alpen. Or Rashi is saying that we didn't penalize here the borrower, the lender, by saying that the lender cannot collect at all. He can collect the money from the borrower, but he doesn't have a lien anymore. Now, if we don't have this predetermined date when all monarchs enter their next year of their reign, if you're going to have a different system, that every king, whenever he became king, well, that's the day number one, and when he completes a year, he enters year number two. It will be difficult to determine if the document is mugdam or mu'ukhir. Now, keep going. Now, there are many details, practically, which are challenging to make this a real case. One thing is that the Beis Din doesn't know when the king became king. If they know, then they know. But look, if they wrote in the document that the loan was given on the month of Kislev, on the third year, b'shnas shlishis, on the third year of so-and-so's reign. And that in that month, lava plani mi plani, so-and-so borrowed from the lender a 1 mana. Now, many other details. Rashi just worked out the case. The Edom that are now in Beis Din, when the lender is collecting from the borrower, they say that when we signed the document, we didn't see the loan happen. We didn't see the loan happen. So how did you Bechlal sign? Since the borrower told us, sign it, that I'm chayiv to so-and-so a money, the Edom are allowed to sign. They didn't see the loan being given, so Rashi quotes from Bava Basra this rule that now, the Edom know that Kislev, the monies were not exchanged. That we know. The Ein Anu Yoidim, and Anu mean Beis Din doesn't know. Imilvu Koidim Lochein or Achar Lochein. We know that on the day of the document there was no loan. Either it happened before or later, but we know, the Edom say we know, that money was given in the year of Tammuz, and they say on the third year of the king. We don't have to read further. But that's what the Edom say. And the halacha is, since the witnesses that signed the document, they say that they saw a loan being given on Tammuz, we connect the loan of the document to Tammuz. So there's a document dated Kislev, and the loan was given in Tammuz. Now, is the Tammuz after Kislev? Or is Tammuz before Kislev? If Tammuz is before Kislev, then it's a post-dated document, it's good. You can collect from the Nechasim from Kislev. At least from the later date. If Tammuz is after Kislev, that means that the loan was, if Tammuz is before Kislev, if Tammuz is after Kislev, that means they wrote a predated document, then this document, Bechlal, can never be used to collect anything that's real estate. And again, Beis Din doesn't know the actual date when the king became a date. So it's good to have this predate. Echad b'Nisan is when the year changes. So if they say third year of the reign, Tammuz, the document says third year Kislev, must mean that the Tammuz, right, was before Kislev. Because if the Tammuz would have been after Kislev, then you would have gone over Echad b'Nisan. Then the document, then the Edom would have said the loan happened in Tammuz b'Shana Revis. Good. Let's go back inside the Gemara. Tanach Rabbanan, we learned in a brayso that Melech she'amad be'esrim v'tisha ba'adar.
Rabbi.
Yes.
A quick question on this post-dating and pre-dating shtar.
Yep.
If my loan took place and then I didn't do a shtar at the time, and later on when I'm doing the shtar, can I then put the date of the shtar back when the loan actually happened? You know, is that called
let me tell you why you're not allowed to do it. Because the whole concept is that the purchasers from the borrower, why should they lose out? The answer is because you needed to do due diligence. Now today it's a lot easier to do due diligence. How would someone find out that the one who's selling a piece of real estate, whether they owe money or not? The only way they will know it is that when you write a document was something that has a greater, it becomes known a lot quicker than a non-documented loan. The documentation of a loan gives it a coil, it makes it known. So it wasn't known. And if the purchaser can say, I did due diligence, I never knew there was a loan, then why should I lose out? That's a valid claim. Okay, inside the Gemara. Tanach Rabbanan, we learned in a brayso. We're just applying this concept of be'echad b'nisan just to point out that whenever we take a date in the year and we say, this is the Rosh Hashana, that would mean that if a king became a king the 29th of Adar, Echad ben Nisan, you write in the document, we are in the second year of this guy's reign. Melech she'amad be'esrim v'tisha ba'adar, if a king became a king on the 29th of Adar, kivin she'giah be'echad ben Nisan, once it's the first day of Nisan, also lo shana, a year has been completed. And on the other hand, ve'im lo yamad ela echad ben Nisan, he entered his office echad ben Nisan. Ein moinen lo shana, at she'yagiah l'nisan acher. You only say he's in a second year when a full year went by. And now let's go back. The Gemara is now quoting the brayso, the first clause. Melech she'amad be'esrim v'tisha b'adar, if a king became a king the 29th of Adar. Kivin she'giah echad ben Nisan, once it's the first day of Nisan, also lo shana. So says the Gemara, hakamash malan, daf beis amid beis, that what? Number one, the Nisan Rosh Hashana l'malachim. You learn two dinim. Number one is that Echad ben Nisan is Rosh Hashana l'malachim, and you don't say that every king has his own anniversary. No. And number two, even only one day, v'yoyim Echad b'shana is Chashav Shana. That how important is that? I want you to know that there is really a machlokes tanoim whether we say halachically that one day in the year is considered the year or not. It's a machlokes tanoim. But being that here we are speaking about, as we explained, this rabbinic penalty of saying that if you have a predated document, you can never use it to collect real estate. That's a rabbinic law. So what we are saying is that according to all of the Tanoim, if it's only Nogeya Dinei Derabanan, yes, Yoim Echad B'Shana is Chashav Shana. End of that part of clause. Now the Gemara is quoting the second clause on the brayso. So the Gemara says, Pshita, why did the brayso have to say that? So the Gemara says, no, it's not Pshita. It's not a given. Tzricha. What happened was, the Imnu Alema Adar, he was voted. It's amazing how there was democracies then, so-called democracies. In other words, if the way you determine democracy is people vote for their ruler, in Rome, right? In those days, there was already a lot of voting to see who will be the leader. And that means you count the votes. What happens if someone was voted in from Adar? Right here in America, it's somewhere in November. But when do you actually enter the office at a later date? So do you go by when the person was voted, or do you go when the person actually ascended the throne? Or today in English, it would be when you entered the office. So Ma'al the Tema, that Nimnu Leitartin Shnin, that since he was voted in an Adar, once Echad ben Nisan comes and further, we should say we are in a second year of reign, of rule, Kamash Malan, that the year begins when the king was in office. Not from when the king was voted to become the king. Next, another brayso with other nuance, other details. Tanach Rabbanan, we learned in a brayso. Meis ba'adar, another detail. If king number one passed away in Adar, and va'amar achar tachtav be'adar, and the second king was appointed in the same month. When you would write then a document, we're not speaking about scenarios where there was a coup, where you can't even mention the reign of the prior one. No, we're speaking about when people wrote documents, they can choose. They can either write the year of the one, Olav Shalom, or of the one, Shalita. you can choose. So the din is taka moinin shana lozeh lozeh. The same year you can date a document to either king. Next din in the Braisa, Meis ben Nisan v'amad achar tachtav ben Nisan. Same thing. If the first king passed away in Nisan and the other one was appointed on the same month, also moinin shana. You can, lozeh lozeh. Meis, the last case, Meis ba'adar v'amad achar tachtav ben Nisan. If king number 1 passed away in Adar, king number 2 only entered office in Nisan, moinin l'shayna l'rishon. The prior year can only be counted to the prior king, and Shniya, and the new year can only be counted to the current king. And the Gemara is going to go back and analyze and explain the novelty of each line in this Braisa. So Amar Mar, the master, the Tana taught us, Meis ba'adar v'amad achar ba'adar moinin shana lozeh lozeh pshita. What novelty do we learn from over here? The Gemara says there's a chiddush. Mao, the time one would think that shata lebeitrei loy maninan. We can never count 1 year for 2 kings, right? Chitas dabar echad l'dor v'lo shnei dabarim l'dor. Says the Braisa, no, when it comes to the way we would write documents and it's about giving honor to the king, there's nothing wrong using the same year. Either you can count it to the deceased king or to the new king. You can use the same year for both. Next clause in the Braisa, Meis ben Nisan, v'amad achar tachtav ben Nisan. So here again, since the old king ruled even 1 day, Echad ben Nisan, and let's say that was now the 4th year of his reign, so that year will continuously be counted the 4th year of his reign. Moinin shana, or the new year, the new year for the new king. So again, pshita, what's new over here? So the Gemara says there's a novelty here. Maldetema, you would think, when is 1 day enough for you to say, even though you only were 1 day, right? Like the king became a king chaftes other. So Echad ben Nisan is in the 2nd year. That's because 1 day is the last day, is the most powerful day. But maybe Avol Tchina Shana Lo Yomrin, but we don't give that same power to the beginning of the year. So if the old king passed away at the end of Echad ben Nisan, he only ruled the 1st day of the year. Kumash Malon, no, that the 1st day Bashana is also Chashav Shana. This is so significant. I want you to know that throughout Chazal, we have 2 statements, and they complement each other, but they are opposites. One is Hakoil Hoylach Acharachitum. Everything goes after the end. There's a certain power by the end. Or in the business world, it's the closer. You can do all of the pre-steps, but there's a certain, you ended it, so the end, that counts. That sealed it. But when you just began a process, it's much weaker. And on the other hand, in our Masechta, Al Pi Kabbalah, what we're saying, Al Pi the Pnimi is that the beginning is everything. It's not the Tchilas Hashanah, it's the Rosh Hashana. And there's something that happens on Rosh Hashana. And here we're speaking about kings. That means the Pnimi is that no matter when you became the king, on Echad ben Nisan, there is some new power that's given to you, the king, for the whole year. It's unpackaged throughout the year, but it was given to you on that moment. And that's why Yom Echad is Chashav Shana the whole year. And if he only ruled for 1 minute in that year, it's really Mixas Hayom Kekolay also. And then it's the Yom Echad Chashav Shana. That is his year. And number 3.
Rabbi, that's great, but practically, I don't understand this Havamina, because end of the day, then you would have 2 Echad Nisans referring to the same year of the king. So how could you think that it's not Chashav?
No. It's what we would think.
First Nisan of the 3rd year.
Oh, very good. So let's go to David and Shlomo. Okay, David passed away and Shlomo became the new king. Let's say, we know David HaMelech passed away on Shavuos, but let's say David HaMelech would have passed away on Beis Nisan. So one would, and before he passed away, he was already king for, let's say, for 40 years. And then that Echad ben Nisan, the way we're cheshboning, he entered the 41st year. We would have thought that if you want to write your documents to David HaMelech, you can do that. You can write it. But you cannot say that it's the 41st year of the reign of David. David HaMelech only ruled for 1 day. You would still have to write it's the 40th year of David HaMelech. The 40th year of David, or the 1st year to Shlomo.
Yeah, but then you would have 2 dates that are using the same date that are a year apart.
What do you mean by that? I don't understand. Wait.
Meaning, if you had to use the 40th year on the 2nd day when it's really the 41st.
Yes.
Then it could mean that year, or it could mean the year before, because had you written a document the year before, would have the exact same date. That's what I'm saying. The Havamina seems it makes sense to me.
And what's wrong?
You're saying that maybe they couldn't actually write that it was the rain.
No, what Danny is pointing out is when you want to prevent a mixture of a predated document, it would create confusion. Yes, it would create confusion. So exactly. So you would not be able. So you can't write it to the deceased king, not to create confusion. But you can write the 31st year when he didn't rule for the 41st year. He only ruled for 40 years. No, if you ruled on the day of Rosh Hashana, you ruled for the whole year. There's something about Rosh Hashana. The whole year is in it. The third clause in the Braisa is Meis ba'adar, if the original king passed away in Adar. V'amar achar tachtov an Nisan, so then moinen only l'rishon l'rishon u'shniya l'shniya. Again pshita. So here the Gemara says lo tzricha. What happened was not only was the new king voted in Adar that we already had before, but now there is a very important halachic concept, which is that when it comes to monarchy, and halachically, when it comes to many other areas of halacha, like Rabbanus, there is a concept of Yerusha. I know that lahavdil the goyim call it nepotism, but we don't call it nepotism. Yerusha. We learned these dinim, a melech ben melech is a lot closer to the throne. So what happens if David HaMelech would have passed away in Adar, and they voted, if that would have been the case, they voted Shlomo HaMelech in Adar, and he's a melech ben melech, even though he only entered the office on Nisan. Here you would already say that you can count the first year of Shlomo in Adar, which would mean Echad ben Nisan, he entered the second year. Komash Mulan, we don't say that. Even though there's Yerusha by Malchus, and even though they voted him in Adar, you only count the year when he ascended the throne, and now you have to determine what's the date, Echad ben Nisan. Let's read it inside. Lo tzricha, the imnu alei Adar, and he's a melech ben melech. Malchus is Yerusha. Mao the time in this case, nimnu leit harten shenin, that the moment Echad ben Nisan comes in, the new king should be halachically in his second year. Kumash Mulan, that we don't do that. Rosh Hashana is Echad ben Nisan, and what are we looking for? When did the king enter office? When did he ascend his throne? All right, and so now that we explained the first Rosh Hashana, the first application of the first Rosh Hashana of the Mishnah, Echad ben Nisan's Rosh Hashana l'Malachim, we explained what it means, and we explained the halachic consequences of the penalty midrabanan on a predated document. Now the question is, how do you know that the date is Echad ben Nisan? Where do you get that from? And we're going to learn today Rabbi Yochanan, and God willing, tomorrow we're going to learn Rabbi Elazar. Says the Gemara, Amar Rabbi Yochanan, maybe it's another date, Shenemar and Pasuk in Melachim, which is recording Shlomo HaMelech's building of the Beis HaMikdash that happened in the 4th year of the reign of Shlomo. Vayehi b'shmoinim shana va'arba me'ah shana. It was exactly 480 years. Lotzeis b'nei Yisrael meretz Mitzrayim, from the Exodus. And Bashana Haravi'is, in the 4th year of the reign of King Solomon. Now, Bechlal Psukim don't have to give 2 dates. One would have been enough. There's a reason for giving 2 dates. And not only do we know the year, but now B'chodesh Ziv. Chodesh Ziv is the name that we give in Nach for Iyar. In the month of Ziv, which is Chodesh Hasheni, the 2nd month, what's not mentioned in our Mishnah is that Echad ben Nisan, right, is the Rosh Leminyan Chadashim. We're not going to call it a Rosh Hashana, but when you count the months of the year, we know that from the Torah. When the Torah speaks about the 1st month, it's Nisan. The 2nd month is Iyar. That's the 2nd month. Lamelech Shlomo al Yisrael. Again, the 4th. This is going back to the Shana Revis. The 4th year, 2nd month, etc. of King Solomon. That Shlomo HaMelech built a Beis HaMikdash. End of quote. Says Rabbi Yochanan. Again, why did the Torah have to give 2 counts? 480 from Mitzrayim, 4th year of Shlomo. Write one or the other. We're writing them both to make a hekesh, to juxtapose them, to compare them. Makish Malchus Shlomo Yitzias Mitzrayim. What are we comparing them for? Ma Yitzias Mitzrayim. Whenever we are speaking about how many years from the Exodus. Now we're taking this as a given. We count Nisan as the turn year. Happened to be that we left a Nisan. But there could have been another Rosh Hashana to mark the Exodus. But since Yitzias Mitzrayim is counted from Nisan, Af Malchus Shloima, and subsequently all the other Malachim, Limalachim, could be only Malchei Yisrael, Lefi Rab Chizda, that we'll learn tomorrow. But Malachim is Minisan. So there's a Hekesh. Now, the Gemara says, how do you know that Yitzias Mitzrayim, Minolan the Minisan Maninan? We know it happened in Nisan. The whole concept of a Rosh Hashana is, it's not about when it happened, it's about when is there this new Oir Chadash. When do we change the year? When do we count another year? Maybe Mitishra Maninan. And let me add something important, as we will learn when we're going to have in a few daf from now the very famous machlokes between Rabbi Eliezer, Rabbi Yeshua, when did God create the world? And there are many other arguments, Nisan, Tishrei, regarding many other important historical Jewish events. But everyone is moed that the Gemara is going to say that Mitishrei batla avoida ma'avoseinu. Means even while we were in Mitzrayim, the servitude, the avodah kasha, we were already way into the makis, completely ended from Tishrei. So there was a certain amount of freedom while we were still in Mitzrayim. I'm just giving you maybe why we are suggesting Tishrei. At the end of the shir, we'll speak al pi pnimius, another concept of Nisan versus Tishrei, Tishrei versus Nis. So the Gemara says, Lo yisal kadaitach. And now we're going to have a lengthy proof that it can be that when we are speaking about we are in the second year from Exodus, the third year from Exodus, the number changes Nisan and not Echad Nisan. By the way, not Tezvav Nisan. Echad Nisan and not Echad Tishrei. Lo yisal kadaitach. Why? Because it says, I'm quoting a pasuk from Parshas Masei, Vayala Aaron HaKohen el Hoir HaHor, that Aaron HaKohen went up to the mountain that's called this double mountain. Al Pi Hashem, Vayom Hashem, and he passed away there, B'shnas Ha'arboim. In the 40th year, Lotzeis B'nei Yisrael Meretz Mitzrayim, the 40th year from Exodus, B'chodesh HaChamishi Be'echad L'chodesh, this is the only yahrzeit recorded, the date recorded in the Torah, on the 5th month, which is Menachem of Rosh Chodesh on the first day. So we know that Aaron passed away Rosh Chodesh of 40th year. Now in the beginning of Chumash Devarim, Moshe Rabbeinu was gathering the Yidden, giving us his final address. The Torah gives a date to that. What date did Moshe Rabbeinu begin to address us? It says, Vayihi Barboim Shana, on the 40th year. Again, the 40th year, we're going to presume from the leaving of Mitzrayim. What month of the year? Not in Av, but in Shvat. Ba'ashtei Asar Chodesh Be'echad Chodesh. On the first day of Shvat, Rosh Chodesh Shvat, Diber Moshe spoke to the assembly, etc., etc. The presumption here is that this Shvat happened after Av 40th year. Shvat, 40th year. If Echad B'Tishrei would have been the Rosh Hashana, Pashit, then Echad B'Shvat would have been in the 41st year. So the Koi Ba'av, and it's called the 40th year from the Exodus. The Koi B'Shvat, and later, the next parsha, the next Sefer, which is the next parsha. The Koi B'Shvat, and it's still called Shnasu Arboyim, simple, is Mechlal, that the Rosh Hashana from Exodus, Lav Tishrei. And by the way, this already proves that not a single month between Shvat, between Av and Shvat, is the Rosh Hashana for the Exodus. That means it can't be Elul, and it can't be Tishrei, it can't be Mar Cheshvan, it can't be Kislev, it can't be Tevis, and it can't be Shvat. Now the Gemara challenges, hold on. First of all, facts. Bishloima, Haich or Heich, which means when the Torah recorded in Masei the passing of Aaron HaKohen, it says, the 40th year, it says, to Yetzias Mitzrayim. In the beginning of Chumash Devarim, when it says that Moshe Rabbeinu addressed the people, Rosh Chodesh Shvat, on the 40th year, it doesn't say from Yetzias Mitzrayim. How do you know that Devarim is from Yetzias Mitzrayim? Elohim, am I the Mitzrayim? You know, I'll give you a great option. Maybe it's the 40th year from when we built the Mishkan. Guys, we completed, not we began. When was the Mishkan inaugurated? Rosh Chodesh Nisan, from the 2nd year. In other words, it's Gavaldik. Let's say that Echad B'Tishrei is Rosh Hashana to the Exodus. Therefore, when Moshe Rabbeinu was addressing the people, it was the 41st year from the Exodus. Since the Mishkan was built 1 year after the Exodus, Bashana Hashenis, that means that the 40th year of the Mishkan is the 41st year of the Exodus. Adarabah, fits. So the Gemara says, no, even though in the beginning of Chumash Devarim, it says, Ba'arboim Shana, it doesn't say from what, but just like Rav Papa said elsewhere, and we're going to get to that on Daf Gimel. Amazing. We're going to learn a lot of history in tomorrow's daf. Beautiful. Just like Rab Papa says elsewhere that when we have psukim regarding the Nehemiah, Shnas Esrim, in one of these, the 20th year, the Torah doesn't record from what, but we say Ligzeda Shava. We compare them, we put them together. Here also, even though in Chumash Devarim it doesn't say from what, but the fact that it says in Parshas Masay Arboim, Shnas Arboim. And here it says the same expression, Shnas Arboim, we make Gzeda Shava by saying Makan, just like the pasuk in Masay. The passing of Aaron HaKohen was Liyetzias Mitzrayim. Afkan, the address of Moshe Rabbeinu, the 40th year from Yetzias Mitzrayim. So one thing is clear, we ruled out Echad B'Tishrei. Like we mentioned, we ruled out Echad Be'elul, and Echad B'Tishrei, and Echad Mar Cheshvan, and Echad Kislev, and Echad Teves. We ruled all that out. However, all of the months in between Shvat and Av are not ruled out. Maybe the address of Moshe Rabbeinu happened Shvat prior to the passing of Aaron. Gavaldik, you chap the question. You're putting it in the wrong Seder. Let's go back to the first. How do you know that Av happened before, and thus we ruled out all of the months that I just mentioned, including Echad B'Tishrei, 3 lines before the bottom? Maybe the Moshe Rabbeinu was address was Shvat. And by the way, that's going to prove that Echad B'Nisan cannot be Rosh Hashana l'Malachim, cannot be Rosh Hashana l'Yetzias Mitzrayim, because if it would be the Rosh Hashana for the counting of the Exodus, then the passing of Aaron would have been in the 41st year. You got it? Maybe the address of Moshe Rabbeinu happened before the passing of Aaron. So the Gemara says that can be. Why can that not be? Because in Parshas Devarim, one of the things that is mentioned is that when did Moshe Rabbeinu address the people? After he killed Sichon. Achrei hakoisoya Sichon. Now, if the address of Moshe Rabbeinu would have been prior to the passing of Aaron, Sichon was still alive. The whole battle between Moshe Rabbeinu and Sichon, as we'll learn in a moment, happened in consequence of Aaron HaKohen's passing. And when Aaron passed away, Sichon was still alive. How do we know that? Because it says, Daf Gimel, Vayishma, guys, we're going to the end of Chukas. That's the big parsha that jumps from the second year from the Exodus, and it jumps all the way to the 40th year. So the Torah records the passing of Aaron HaKohen, and right after the passing of Aaron HaKohen, it says that Vayishma HaKnani, who was the king of Arad, he heard, and Mashmu Shama, what did he hear? So we know that he heard that Aaron passed away, and in consequence, the miraculous clouds of glory that initially for the 40 years, they were in the merit of Aaron, they departed, even though they returned later, but they departed. And he understood that it departed because Hashem is no longer protecting our people. And therefore, this king and the nation thought, and that's also the meaning what it says, the pasuk, right? The last verse before it says, Vayishma Haknani Melech Harod. The Torah records the passing of Aaron, and then it says, Vayiru Kol Ha'eda, the nation saw Ki Gava Aaron, that Aaron passed away. And on that, V'amar Rab Abohu, don't read Vayiru, they saw, that's the pshat, but there's something deeper. Ela Vayero'u, they were seen. They were seen is because the clouds of glory that surrounded us departed. And as Reish Lakish taught us, the Amar Reish Lakish, that the word Ki, it says Ki Gava Aaron. They saw that Aaron passed away. The word ki could mean that, but the word ki can have 4 meanings. Meshamish bedalad l'shoynes. What are the 4 l'shoynes? If. Dilma means perhaps. Ella means but. And deha means because. So the drush is that the ki means because. That vayero kol ha'eda. They were seen because Aaron passed away, and therefore the Anani HaKavid left. Okay. So the Gemara says, oh, very good. So since when Aaron passed away, Knani was still alive, and it says in the Varim that when did Moshe Rabbeinu give his address? After he killed Sichon. Now we're confusing Sichon and Canaan. We'll have to clarify that it's the same person. So it must be that Moshe Rabbeinu's address happened after the passing of Aaron. Shvat after Menachem Av. And it's all called the 40th year. So that proves that none of the months between Av and Shvat are Rosh Hashana Liyetzias Mitzrayim. And therefore, let's jump back. So Yetzias Mitzrayim is going to be marked from Nisan. And now, since we have the Hekesh to Malchus Shloima, which is the phase of all of the Yiddish Malachim, that Malachim is marked like Yetzias Mitzrayim from Echad bin Nisan. Says the Gemara, hold on, Omi Dami. You're confusing Knani and Sichain, right? Hasam Knani, Hacha Sichain. So the Gemara says, no, they're the same. Tani, we learned in a Braisa that Hu Sichain, another name is Arad, Hu Knan. And now we have two versions. Either that the nickname that was given to this king was Sichain because he was like a Siyach, but he was like a wild fowl, a fowl that lives in the desert. Knan is because Al Shei Malchusai, he ruled over a land that was inhabited by Canaanim, even though he himself was not from the Canaanite nation. And what was his actual name? Aroid, or Aroid. Another version says, no, that Aroid is because he was like a wild Aroid. Different characteristics about that king. Canaan, like the one before, was because the people, the land over which he ruled, were peoples that come from the nation of Canaan, and his name was actually Sichain. So we'll stop over here. So let's just quickly recap that we have a Hekesh l'Rabbi Yochanan between Malchus Shloimeh, the year of his reign, and Yetzias Mitzrayim, being that we ruled out Echad B'Tishrei being the Rosh Hashana for the count of the Exodus. So therefore we're jumping back to Nisan, and just like Yetzias Mitzrayim is counted from Nisan, so the Malachim are also counted Echad B'Nisan, and a lot more we're going to continue. And I just want to share the following, that indeed, Al Pi Chasidus, there are two Rosh Hashanas. Why is that? Because the world was created, we're going to follow the Shita that says the world was created in Tishrei, and Tishrei therefore is the Rosh Hashanah for nature. That means every year, Echad B'Tishrei, there is a new light that goes into nature. And Nisan is the Rosh Hashanah for miracles. We call it the month of Nisan, even though the names of the month were given in Galus Bavel, the first Galus Bavel, but still it's called Nisan miracles. And that's extremely significant to understand when we're speaking about the Yetzias Mitzrayim. Is Yetzias Mitzrayim viewed as a natural event? And therefore, it's somehow connected to Tishrei, even though de facto it only happened in Nisan, but maybe we should change the count in Tishrei. Or is Yetzias Mitzrayim considered a miraculous event? And therefore, we should make its year, the counting of Exodus should be from Nisan. And why is that significant? I'm not speaking about the Exodus, but since Kiyimei Tzeis Cham Eretz Mitzrayim Arenun Leflois, and in Chasidus we learned so much how the Geula HaAsida is compared, it's going to be a lot greater from, but it's compared to, and it really began by Yetzias Mitzrayim, and we know this whole machloikis when it comes to the coming of Mashiach, which the Rebbe connects it to Be'ita versus Achishena. Whether it's going to be a process, a natural process, or whether it's going to be miraculous, mamish, that's the debate over here. What's if the Geula Asida is a miraculous event, like we just learned in Beitza, Shitas Rashi, Shitas Toisvis, that the third Beis HaMikdash is going to come down from the heavens. It's going to appear, it's a miraculous thing, the third Beis HaMikdash. Then it should be connected more to the month of Nisan. If we're going to say the way that Amman Paskins, that there's a chiyuv on Mashiach, and therefore, and through Mashiach on the people, under his reign, to build the Beis HaMikdash, then it's going to be a natural progression of events. Then it should be connected to Tishrei. And really, the way the Rebbe says, it's going to be both. There's the Be'ita and there's the Ba'achishena. And as was Yetzias Mitzrayim, there was both. There was a tremendous miracles that happened, but it's a natural thing that Jewish people should be free people. It's a natural thing. It was inevitable, it needed to happen. And since you have both elements, a natural element and a miraculous element in the Exodus, and as it will be in the future, that's why we're having this discussion, when should we mark the Rosh Hashana? Echad B'Nisan or Echad B'Tishrei? And we paskin that for Yetzias Mitzrayim, what trumps is the miracles. Echad B'Nisan. The only question is, where do we know it from? And God willing, a lot more to be continued tomorrow.